The Linguaverse presents the Shadow Spectrum series introduction. There is a language we speak long before we ever learn to use words. It forms in the breath between impulse and restraint, in the tremor of a child's body when it realizes that not every truth can be spoken, not every need will be met. This is the language of the hidden self, the grammar of survival, the syntax of shadow. Every human being learns it. Few remember they did. It's woven into how we breathe, pause, persuade, withdraw, seduce, comply, or revolt. Before we become fluent in any spoken tongue, we learn the emotional phonetics of protection, when to stay silent, when to smile, when to shrink, and when to charm. And these instincts calcify into habits. Habits become character. Character becomes identity. We call this identity personality, but it's really a script, a constellation of linguistic patterns sculpted by experience, memory, and fear. Each word, each tone, each omission becomes a cipher in the great code of who we think we are. The shadow spectrum is an attempt to decode this language, not as a set of pathologies or diagnoses, but as a living map of the ways we adapt, how the psyche shapes itself into archetypes, how survival becomes strategy, how language becomes armor. In these 16 explorations, we will walk through the architecture of the unseen mind, not to banish the shadow, but to listen to it, not to condemn the traits society calls dark, but to trait them, to understand the intelligence within manipulation, the tenderness beneath control, the wound behind performance, and the longing behind cruelty. Because what we call darkness in human nature is often just language untranscribed, pain without words, power without wisdom, instinct without reflection. The linguistic nature of the shadow, every archetype in the spectrum, the predator, the mirror bearer, the wounded strategist, the puppeteer, the performer, the punisher, speaks a dialect of defense. Their words are weighted by wounds, their silence is coded by necessity. Consider the psychopath, the predator's poise. To most, this figure embodies emotional absence, a moral void. Yet in linguistic terms, the psychopath's voice is a lesson in clarity, precision, and tonal control. Every syllable is deliberate, unburdened by apology. Their calm unsettles because it reveals a world untouched by our usual linguistic currency, empathy. To speak without it is to live in another semantic realm entirely. Or the narcissist, the mirror bearer, whose speech shimmers with self-reference. Their pronouns form constellations around the I, their metaphors bend toward reflection. Every story is a mirror held to the self, and yet beneath that gleam lies an unspoken plea. See me, so I can see myself. The Machiavellian, the puppeteer, masters omission, suggestion, and framing. Their power lies not in what they say, but in what they withhold. A single pause becomes a lever, a rephrased question, a rope. Their sentences are strategies, linguistic chess moves designed to position emotion without ever being caught in its grasp. Each of these figures speaks in code, and so do we, in smaller, subtler ways. The difference is in degree, not kind. When we manipulate to avoid rejection, when we inflate to feel valued, when we detach to stay safe, we are speaking dialects of the same tongue. Language, after all, is the great mirror of consciousness. And in the mirror's dimmest corners, our syntax grows strange, our words sharpen or vanish, our meanings turn inwards like wounded animals. The shadow spectrum is about listening to these shifts, learning to hear what the psyche hides in plain speech. It's about tracing manipulation back to its root in unmet need, and power back to its origin in fear. Because before the shadow wounds others, it speaks to itself. Beyond diagnosis, the linguistic psychology often categorizes darkness through the lens of disorder, psychopathy, narcissism, antisociality, and borderline traits, but language offers a different frame. In the Linguaverse, we treat the shadow as a linguistic event, a set of speech acts born from psychic necessity. To manipulate is to edit reality with words. To seduce is to cast syntax like a spell of belonging. To rage is to burn language to ash, because no word felt safe enough to carry the truth. Where clinical models ask, "What's wrong with you?" linguistic models ask, "What are you trying to say?" What pattern of sound, silence, and symbol helped you survive a moment when honesty was too dangerous? Seen this way, even cruelty becomes communicative, not excusable, but understandable. Control becomes an essay on fear. Charm becomes an essay on abandonment. Silence becomes an essay on shame. In decoding these essays, we reclaim authorship. We cease being characters in unconscious scripts and begin editing the narrative itself. To do this, we'll move through each archetype not as a diagnosis, but as a dialect, a unique grammar of emotion, a vocabulary of defense. The psychopath's brevity, the narcissist's flourish, the Machiavellian's precision, the borderline's intensity, the codependent's apology, the sadist's irony, the trickster's inversion. Each is a syntax shaped by history, personal, cultural, and ancestral, and each holds wisdom once translated. The mirror of evolution. Why do these patterns exist at all? Because evolution rewards adaptability, not purity. A trait that once saved a life becomes a story that rules a lineage. Cunning protected the vulnerable. Charm soothed the aggressor. Detachment endured the unbearable. Over millennia, these strategies fused with identity. What was once armor became skin. What was once a mask became a face. What was once performance became truth. And in our age, digital, performative, hypervisible, these shadows are no longer peripheral, they are central. The predator leads corporations. The mirror bearer curates platforms. The puppeteer drafts policy. The performer sells salvation. The order keeper designs systems. They are us amplified, our survival codes scaled into culture. To study the shadow, then, is not to gaze into pathology, but to read the operating manual of civilization. Each episode in the shadow spectrum will trace one of these codes, how it forms, speaks, and moves. We'll draw on psychology, linguistics, mythology, and lived experience to reveal the architecture behind the archetype. Language as light. If the shadow is a script, then awareness is authorship. And language, conscious, deliberate, integrated, is the pen. Words don't just describe reality, they construct it. To shift our vocabulary is to shift our perception. To rename fear as boundary, to call control by its truest name, uncertainty, to replace performance with presence, is to rewrite the code of consciousness itself. Throughout the shadow spectrum, you'll be invited to engage linguistically, to reflect, rephrase, and rewrite. Every episode offers not just theory, but translation exercises, ways to decode your inner speech and craft new narratives. You'll learn to hear the grammar of defense in your tone, the syntax of shame in your pauses, the metaphors of fear in your choices of words. You'll learn how the unconscious edits speech, slipping pronouns, softening truths, amplifying virtue, and how to gently reclaim those edits. Because healing is not silence. Healing is revision. The map of the 16. The journey ahead unfolds across 16 territories, potentially more, each a chamber of the linguistic psyche. We begin at the engine, where shadow traits converge in intelligence and travel through charm, control, wound, reflection, strategy, validation, power, and purity. We'll meet the predator and the mirror bearer, the wounded strategist and the puppeteer, the abandoned child and the invisible healer, the punisher and the trickster, the oracle and the ghost, until we arrive at the sovereign, the integrated voice that speaks with coherence, neither shadowed nor blinding, but whole. This map is not linear, it spirals, folds, mirrors itself, because shadow work is not a descent. It's an orbit, a gravitational dance between awareness and instinct. What this is, and what it isn't the shadow spectrum, is not a diagnostic tool. It's not a moral tribunal or a taxonomy of villains. It's a linguistic atlas, a guide to the hidden geographies of motive and meaning. Our task is not to purge the shadow, but to integrate its intelligence, to turn manipulation into discernment, performance into expression, detachment into clarity. This is not self-improvement. It's self-translation, because the shadow is not evil. It's encrypted. Every dark trait contains an unmet need. Every cruel phrase hides a clause of pain. Every silence carries the ghost of a word that once burned too bright to speak. In this series, we'll bring light to those clauses. We'll listen for the echoes beneath aggression, the longing beneath control, the grief beneath grandiosity. And in doing so, we'll begin to hear the whole self, not just the part that smiles in daylight, but the voice that speaks in dreams, the one that mutters behind the mask, the one that remembers the first word ever swallowed. The invitation: you are not here to judge, you are here to hear. Each episode will offer a mirror, not a verdict. May see yourself in traits you once condemned, and strangers in traits you once claimed. That is the point. Because the shadow is not something you have, it's something you are, in every moment. You hide what is true to stay safe. This is not a path of purity, but of complexity. Not perfection, but precision, learning to name what moves within you with linguistic accuracy. To speak clearly is to see clearly, and to see clearly is to love truth more than comfort. So come not with shame, but with curiosity. Come not to cleanse, but to comprehend. Come not to fix, but to translate. The only requirement is honesty, not moral honesty, but emotional, the willingness to hear yourself, to trace your words back to their first silence, to sit with what they reveal. You are not broken. You are bilingual, fluent in both light and shadow. This series is your phrasebook, the linguistic practice. To integrate shadow through language, we will work with 3 principles. 1. Decoding, noticing patterns, omissions, pronouns, metaphors. Ask, what is this word protecting? 2. Reframing, translating fear into need, control into care, shame into longing. Ask, what is this sentence really trying to say? 3. Rewriting, crafting new narratives with conscious vocabulary. Ask, what would this truth sound like if it trusted itself? Each episode invites reflection and response, prompts, practices, and poetic experiments to reveal how your own language mirrors your shadow's shape. In time, you'll begin to hear yourself differently, noticing when humor hides hurt, when eloquence masks emptiness, when intellect builds distance, when silence cries louder than speech. And in that hearing, something shifts from reaction to resonance, from defense to dialogue, toward wholeness. The goal of this journey is not illumination that blinds, but integration that balances. To walk through the shadow spectrum is to realize that every dark pattern was once light misdirected. That control began as care. That pride began as preservation. That cruelty began as clarity denied. Language holds the key to this alchemy. For every destructive phrase, there is a redemptive translation. I own you to I fear being abandoned. You're wrong to I need to feel safe. I don't care to I cared and it hurt. Wholeness is not silence. It's fluency, the ability to speak all dialects of the self with awareness and grace. Invocation. So, as you step into this spectrum, remember, the shadow is not your enemy. It is your oldest tongue. It spoke before you learned words. It whispered through choices you didn't yet understand. It still echoes in every hesitation, every clever lie, every sentence you softened to be loved. Here, we will not fear it. We will listen. We will translate. We will give it grammar, context, and compassion. For the shadow's greatest desire is not power, but presence to be seen, spoken, and understood. And when you can speak its language without shame, you will no longer be ruled by it. You will have become its author. Welcome to the Shadow Spectrum, a journey through the hidden linguistics of the mind. A study of speech and silence, strategy and sincerity, performance and presence. This is not a descent. It's a translation from fear into fluency, from armor into authorship, from shadow into self. Coming soon, the Shadow Spectrum with James Miller. This place called Earth,